Greetings, booktubers, and welcome back to Grammaticus Books. Today we're going to be ranking the top 5 science fiction movies of all time that are based upon a science fiction novel. So we're going to be talking about the movies, ranking the movies, not the books, but we will be talking about the books in conjunction with those movies. So this is a highly subjective field. This is just my opinion, so your mileage may vary. But let's go ahead and jump into it with movie number 5. What is the 5th greatest movie ever based upon a science fiction novel? And it is Dune, the 1984 version, produced by Dino De Laurentiis, directed by David Lynch, starring Kyle MacLachlan, Patrick Stewart, Sting, and who's the other big guy in this one? It is Max von Sydow. Yes, how could I forget Max von Sydow? And based, of course, upon the epic book by Frank Herbert, Dune, which came out in 1965. That's a 1965 edition sitting right there. It's the best-selling science fiction novel of all time. It's widely hailed as the greatest science fiction novel ever written, and I have a hard time arguing with that. The movie, however, is a bit of a mixed bag. Parts of this are absolutely a mess. The acting is spectacularly bad in parts. It's very hard to follow in parts. They brought in Toto, the rock group, to do the rock soundtrack to it, and it was just god-awful. So if it has that much bad parts in it, why is this ranked as number 5 in the top 5 sci-fi movies of all time? And the reason is because when David Lynch got it right, he really got it right. His sets were just stupendous. They were epic. The costumes and the outfits were fantastic. They hit the nail right on the head. They really brought out the character of the book with those sets and the costumes. And the scene at the start of the movie where the Spacing Guild meets with the Emperor in his throne room is one of the best filmed sci-fi scenes of all time. It is just fantastic. It's a perfect science fiction scene when the Spacing Guild navigator rolls in his biochamber to talk to the Emperor. It absolutely is just perfection up on the film. So despite all of its flaws, and also because of the fact that they attempted this movie, this just gigantic world-scaling movie in 1984, back when you had no CGI to help you. That and everything that they got right is why I put this David Lynch version of Dune in at number 5. So that's number 5. What's number 4? Number 4 in the rankings is The Thing by John Carpenter in 1982. The 1982 movie, The Thing by John Carpenter, based on a 1938 novella called Who Goes There by John Campbell. And that story is collected here. This is a 1940s anthology, science fiction anthology that I actually picked up at the Brattle bookstore. And it does contain Who Goes There. I have read it. It's been a long time. But John Campbell actually wrote it under a pen name of Don Stewart. It's about 50 pages long. It's about an alien being that gets into an Arctic research station and can take over the bodies of human beings or any living being. And it's trying to take over the entire station so that it can get itself into the more populated areas of the world and then spread across the entire world. And the crew have discovered that it's there. They know what the danger is, and they don't know who's infected and who isn't infected, and it becomes this fantastic horror science fiction novel. And John Carpenter just reached into that book, he pulled it out, and he put it right up on the screen. And he had fantastic casting for it. He's got Kurt Russell as McGreedy. He's got Keith David, who plays a fantastic role across from Kurt Russell as Childs. And all the other actors were perfectly cast. And John Carpenter was smart enough to know to build up and really have you get a feel for the personalities of the people on the station before he unleashes this horror on it. And it just intensifies the tension and the drama as you don't know who's infected and you're trying to figure out who's going to live and who's not going to live or make it to the end of the movie. And the end of the movie is great. I won't give it away, but the end of the movie is absolutely fantastic. And they filmed the majority of this film inside of a gigantic freezer that they constructed out in Los Angeles. And then for the outdoor shots, they filmed it in some wilderness areas as well. But it's an absolute masterpiece. It didn't do that well in the box office, but it immediately gained a cult following afterwards, especially after it came out on DVD and got replay up on TV. And now it's widely considered to be one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies of all time. And that is why it comes in here at number 4 on the list. So that's number 4, John Carpenter, The Thing from 1982. So what's number 3? Number 3 is The Martian by Ridley Scott, starring Matt Damon. This, of course, is 2015, based on the book by Andy Weir, which came out in 2013. Weir actually wrote the book, but then couldn't get a publisher to pick it up, and he wound up self-publishing it in chapters on his own website. It attracted the attention of Amazon, and Amazon brought it over in e-version only, and you could buy it for 99 cents on Amazon. And at that point, it just took off, and it became the best-selling science fiction book on Amazon's site. And then, of course, by that time, it attracted the attention of a publisher, got published as a book, and then Ridley Scott picked it up. And it's just an excellent adaptation of Andy Weir's hard science fiction novel of survival on the surface of Mars. Mark Watney is the main character, played by Matt Damon, and it's a story of survival. He's a botanist who gets stranded on Mars and is waiting for a rescue crew to come and get him. And he has to figure out how to live long enough on the surface of Mars to survive for the rescue crew. The book is excellent. It's just a wonderfully done book. It's full of humor as well as tension and survival. It's a plot-driven book, which I like. I really like plot-driven books with good characters. And they faithfully adapt it. They adapt it perfectly. I mean, Matt Damon is perfectly cast as Mark Watney. He gives, in my opinion, an Oscar-winning performance in this flick. And the CGI and the practical effects come together. They blend seamlessly, and it really transports you to Mars, and is just a fantastic adaptation of Andy Weir's book. And for that reason, it's smart, it's funny, it's really well done, it's excellently done, and for that reason, I bring it in at number 3, which takes us to number 2 on the list, which is another Ridley Scott film. I really like Ridley Scott. He's one of my favorite directors. We're just going to forget about his last couple of movies and pretend he didn't do those. But Ridley Scott, Blade Runner, also from 1982, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check that. Yes, it is 1982 for Blade Runner. And this is the final cut. The movie release version, in my opinion, was actually not good. But let's talk about the story it's based on first, and then we'll go back into the movie. The movie is based off a book by Philip K. Dick. It's based off a book called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And I'll be honest with you, I think this is 1968 that this came out. I think that's correct. Philip K. Dick is not my favorite author. This isn't my favorite book. I have read it. Philip K. Dick had mental issues. He had drug addiction issues, and frankly, the drug addiction issues probably fueled the mental issues. And his characters in his novels always tended to go into deep psychology and psychoses of the characters. And I think a lot of his mental illness frequently worked its way into his books with his characters. And I personally don't care for that. And that, I think, is certainly the case in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep with his main character, Deckard, and some of the other characters in here. This could be a pretty weird book. It's post-apocalyptic West Coast. All the animals are dead, or almost all of them are dead. So the greatest status symbol that you can have is to own an animal, but there aren't enough to go around. So they make android animals, and everybody is trying to get an animal. And then there's a hierarchy of animals in order to increase your status within society. But human-based androids aren't allowed on Earth. And Deckard is a Blade Runner, a detective, who's hunting down 6 of these Nexus models. However, Ridley Scott was smart enough to take the good elements of this story. He recognized the core of a good story. He brings it out. He leaves all the bad elements sitting there, and he makes just a great sci-fi noir film, Blade Runner, and then releases it. But the movie production studio edited the crap out of his movie before it got to the screen. And they added in a bunch of voiceovers, and then they also deleted out some of the scenes in there, and they ruined the movie. It really was not a good movie, the movie release version that hit the screens back in 1982. But I think it was 10 years later in 1992, they released it on DVD as the director's cut. And in the director's cut, they removed all those soliloquies, those voiceovers, and they put back in Ridley Scott's scenes that had been deleted out of the movie. And it instantly went from a movie that was very forgettable to one of the greatest science fiction movies ever filmed and put up on the screen. Ridley Scott's vision and direction is just stupendous. His ability to create an atmosphere of post-apocalyptic West Coast America It's just hands down, bar none, one of the best atmospheric movies you're ever going to come across. He's got Harrison Ford in the lead role. Rutger Hauer is playing Roy Batty, the antagonist. You've got Sean Young turns in the performance of her career as a Nexus at the main factory where they make these Nexus models. The name of the place escapes me at the moment. But you've got hers in it. You've got Edward James Olmos. They all give great performances. I would argue that Rutger Hauer turns in the best performance of his career as Roy Batty. His speech at the end of the movie, where he starts off, "I've seen things that you people wouldn't believe," is one of the greatest science fiction speeches in movie cinema history. It's fantastic. It's far better than the book that it's based off of, and it's a movie that it will go down as one of the greatest films ever made from science fiction. And for that reason, it comes in at number 2 on the list. So we've gone 5, 4, 3, 2. All we're left with is number 1. What could it be? What could be the greatest science fiction movie ever filmed in the history of science fiction based upon a science fiction novel? Well, I'm glad you asked, and it is Starship Troopers from 1997, directed by Paul Verhoeven. Yes, it is. It is Starship Troopers. I'm not yanking your leg. I'm completely serious. This is a fantastic movie, and allow me to explain. So this is Starship Troopers, based off of the book of the same name by Robert A. Heinlein, that came out in 1959. This is the ground zero, the book that's ground zero for military science fiction. It's all sort of a young adult coming of age book, but really not really. A lot of people classify it as young adult, but I don't. I think it's more of an adult book. It is the book that launches military science fiction, and it creates the idea of armored super troopers, power armored troopers in the future. And it is a very good book. It's a bit of a controversial book. Some of the criticism that it takes is founded, and some of the criticism, actually I'd say most of the criticism that it takes is unfounded. But this movie takes a lot of criticism, and there's some good reasons to give it criticism. But I'll tell you this movie works on multiple levels. It is just fine to watch, to turn your brain off, and for 2 hours soak in a great science fiction thriller movie, military thriller movie. It works fabulously at that level. And then running underneath that is this deep satire where Paul Verhoeven, who grew up under the Nazis, under Nazi occupation in the Netherlands, and detested anything even smacking of authoritarianism, he runs this satire line through it that is fantastic. He satires authoritarianism. He satires the military. It's anti-military. He goes into all the dangers of propaganda, of the government controlling all the means of information, and he has this satire running underneath here. And the critics missed it when this movie came out in 1997. They missed the satire completely, and the Washington Post called it Nazi propaganda up on film. And a lot of the other main critics chimed in along the same ways, saying that it was basically a pro-fascist Nazi movie. And how they could miss the satire is beyond me, because Paul Verhoeven is just clubbing you in the head with it through the whole movie. I mean, it's not subtle. Parts of it are subtle, but most of it is just very unsubtle, just punch you right in your face. The anti-military meat grinder that Mr. Verhoeven despised so much. Interestingly, these same critics, about a decade or so later, they came around, they realized their mistake, and they went back and they retracted their statements that they had their initial reviews of the movie, and came back and recognized that yes, no, this was not a pro-Nazi movie. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It had this great satire running through it. And so you've got that running in it as well. And the critics missed it, like I said, because it's deceptively smart. It's smart, it's funny, there's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of things. You can watch this movie and rewatch it, and every time you watch it, you're going to catch another little subtle piece of humor in it, or where it takes a poke at the military, or it takes a poke at authoritarianism, or you're going to catch something that was just really well done, because Paul Verhoeven makes a great military action sci-fi adventure movie. He's trying to build up this theme that these young actors, and he's got a bunch of young actors in here who were no names when they came into it, and that was on purpose, in order to feed into this theme that that the Terran Federation was feeding people into this, the young people, in a military meat grinder. And he does such a good job, though, of portraying military life and making a good action adventure novel that it actually does come off as a little bit pro-military. And some of that is because he gets it right. He sets this picture of life in boot camp where they're getting trained up to go fight the alien beings, the antagonists, the bugs. He hits the nail on the head. He gets the atmosphere. He hits it just right. He sets that mood. He understands what life in a boot camp was like, or he had people who advised him when he was shooting the film. And his depictions of the military action are right on the money. If you were going to take, let's say, 1940 style tactics from World War II and then just transport it into space, which is what the book did in 1959, and is what the movie does here in 1997. And he does so in a spectacular manner that is just a joy to watch. It's a lot of fun. I really appreciate it when a director can get the military aspect of the movie correct, which frequently doesn't happen these days, unfortunately. Most directors, they don't understand it and they just miss the mark. But this one hits the mark. In addition to that, this movie is also has a large number of women in it. If you were to apply the Bechtel test to this movie, it would actually pass the Bechtel test. Now, I can't believe that I'm actually uttering the phrase the Bechtel test because I despise it. I don't think it's not a good measurement to place up against either a novel or a book in order to grade it as to whether what its merits are. I think it's a very bad measure to put up to it. But if you were to apply the Bechtel test to Starship Troopers, it would pass it and then some, because it has great female characters in it. And one of the reasons it has great female characters is because Heinlein understood that females made better pilots than males. There was actually a study at the end of World War II that Heinlein was aware of that studied the physiology of males and females and determined that females could handle G-forces better than males and that they had quicker reaction times, and that because of that, they would make better combat pilots than males. And Heinlein works that into his book here. All of the pilots are females. So he has strong female cast in here in this book. And Verhoeven takes that and he puts it into Starship Troopers as well. And you have these great, strong main characters in here who have a lot of interaction with the protagonist, who is Johnny Rico, played by Casper Van Dien. And in addition to that, Verhoeven takes it a step farther and he puts the women into the mobile infantry themselves, into the infantry fighting forces. And he intermixes them in the boot camp. And there's the infamous shower scene, the co-ed shower scene in the movie that he took a lot of crap over. But I'm telling you, it's not that bad. It fits into the theme of the movie that Verhoeven has got going. And it fits into the theme of Heinlein's book. I think Heinlein would have approved of this movie had he been around to see it. This would have been right up Heinlein's alley. And it's done spectacularly well. The practical effects in it are excellent. You've got Michael Ironside, who plays the teacher when they're in high school prior to the attack by the arachnids, and then he becomes the lieutenant in charge of their unit, their mobile infantry unit. I think he's a lieutenant. He might not be higher. He might be higher than that. He might be a captain, but he plays just a fantastic role in it. And you can watch this movie over and over. It's endlessly quotable, which is always a good sign for a movie. If you can quote it, and you can quote this movie all the time in any everyday life, if you wanted to. And I can watch this movie repeatedly, which is always a good sign of a movie. So is it a little cheesy in spots? Yes, it is. It's kind of a cheesy movie. Am I a little bit tongue-in-cheek when I'm calling it the #1 movie of all time? Yes, I am. But at the same time, no, I'm not, because this is a great flick. This is a great flick. If you only watch this and you think it's just a cheesy action adventure movie, I would implore you, put it back on, watch it with an eye to the satire that's running underneath it. Watch it to an eye as how well the military is represented into it. Watch it with an eye as to how well female actors are portrayed in it and the roles that they're given in it. And it might change your mind. You might come away with the same opinion that I do. I really love this movie. I love the book. I'm in the middle of rereading Heinlein right now, Starship Troopers. And when I finish, it will get an entire video on its own because it deserves it. But I think that's about it. I'm talked so long. I'm starting to lose my voice here. It's late at night. I need to get this up and get it edited and posted up for the channel. So with that, I'm going to leave you with this. You kill anything with more than 2 legs. Got me? And say, yes, sir, we've got you. And that's it. Take care, be safe. And this is Grammaticus saying that I will catch you guys in the future.